Through the process of researching and writing this book, I uncovered a number of unexpected instances in which survivor bias impacts our daily lives. I also became convinced that survivor bias clouds our view of the past, which prevents us from gaining a clear view of our future. Two types of survivor bias. Survivor bias comes in two types that are differentiated by our ability to observe the non-survivors. The first could be called Diagoras-type survivor bias. In the example of the Greek ships, Diagoras is the observer. He is able to count the number of ships that returned safely and those that did not. Even if all the ships foundered and were lost at sea, Diagoras could still observe that all the sailors had drowned. The second could be labeled sailor-type survivor bias. In this case, the observer is a sailor on one of the ships. A sailor is able to count the number of ships that left port and safely returned, but only if he survives the voyage. Just as in the case of Diagoras-type survivor bias, a sailor can be deceived upon returning to port by failing to consider the non-surviving ships, but he can be further misled if he does not realize that his observations are limited to only those instances in which he is still alive. About this book. This book is split into two parts. In Part 1, we will look at Diagoras-type survivor bias. We will hear how survivor bias is used by others to deceive us into overpaying hedge fund managers, taking pills that don't cure our ills, following the bad advice of many advice books, overspending on lotteries, opening restaurants that are likely to close, and suffering through diets that don't help us lose weight. We will show how a professor discovered during World War II that Allied Bomber Command was deceived by survivor bias, and that even today, history is still written by the winners. In Part 2, we will examine sailor-type survivor bias. We will demonstrate how survivor bias distorts our perspective on evolutionary history, including our good fortune that 65 million years ago a space rock targeted our planet, wiping out the dinosaurs, and that, against all odds, 50,000 years ago, we vanquished at least 5 other human species. We will analyze how survivor bias misleads us about the dangers of atomic weapons and global warming. We will also see how survivor bias aids the resolution of Fermi's paradox, the puzzle concerning the existence of intelligent life in the universe, and provides insights into the mortality of Schrödinger's cat, one of the most important questions in modern physics. Previous studies of survivor bias have been inaccessible to most, housed in formula-laden statistical journals or tucked away in academic papers written for subject area experts. But you won't find any math or technical jargon here. Instead, we will apply the concept of survivor bias to concrete, real-world examples. Just because math is my favorite subject does not mean it should be yours. We will put flesh on the bones of this theoretical concept by working through examples, minus the equations. As each example is discussed in turn, we will examine how survivor bias is used to deceive us and how we manage to deceive ourselves. Then, we will set out ways to correct for survivor bias, so we are not fooled by the winners. We begin with survivor bias in financial services. The first person to call out how survivor bias is used to deceive us in financial services was a New York stockbroker who wrote a book in 1940 that remains to this day one of the most quoted texts on the subject of Wall Street. The stockbroker began his book with a question about boats. Part 1. Chapter 1. Financial Services, So Much for So Little. Fred Schwed and Customer Yachts. Fred Schwed, 1902 to 1966, was, in the terminology of his day, a customer's man. For almost 2 decades, he worked for the Wall Street firm of Edwin Wolfe, hawking stocks to retail investors. Today, he would be called a registered representative, or, more commonly, a stockbroker. In his spare time, he wrote books, including a popular children's novel, Wacky the Small Boy, a bestseller during the 1930s. Schwed was the son of a member of the New York Curb Exchange, later renamed the New York Stock Exchange. In 1924, after graduating from Columbia University,